Welcome back, everyone. So today, I feel like changing something up. This is going to be my first ever top 10 video ever, which is kind of crazy to think. This is going to be my top 10 favorite romance novels currently. I've actually only read 11 of them, so yeah. So with these, there's a trilogy, and it's going to count as one book because it's the worst one. So we're going to get into it. I'm actually pretty excited from like my least favorite to my favorite, and we're going to go from there. So number 10 is pretty simple. That is the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy. I read this. I don't even know if it's considered romance, but it is sort of. But I read this earlier this year in February, and I'm not gonna lie, this was a terrible trilogy. This was awful. It's super cringy. The characters are really bad, and the writing's really bad too. And I found out it's a ripoff of Twilight, so it's just like, it's even worse. Especially now since I'm reading Twilight. Book one of this series, you can definitely tell it's almost page for page exactly like Twilight in some aspects, besides of course the vampires, and these guys are adult. But in Twilight, you know, they're teenagers. Well, one of them's teenager. Doesn't matter. I'm just saying, 50 Shades of Grey, terrible. It's funny. There are some scenes in it that makes me like actually laugh because I'm like, this is so corny. But other than that, it's just not that good. I didn't ever feel like, oh yeah, these guys are definitely meant to be. No, it just was a toxic relationship the whole time. I didn't really feel like, ooh, yeah, this is so good. I never felt that at all. I actually felt nothing. So number 10 on this list is, well, pretty simple. And that's Twilight. I haven't read. I'm currently reading New Moon. And I'm currently reading the other two books after. But Twilight's number 9 on here. I don't think we're going to change. I think it's better than 50 Shades of Grey. Because this is actually entertaining. It is. It's very entertaining. The characters are all cringe, and I don't think the writing's the greatest. But in general, yeah, I think it's fine. Especially for a grown man that's reading this. If I was a 15-year-old girl, I'd be going wild over it. And I was there when it was really popular. I was there when it was written. But I'm just saying, I think Twilight's fine. It's definitely not my cup of tea, but I'm just getting these all out of the way now. So 7 and 8 can actually be flipped back and forth. It doesn't really matter too much, but it's just the first two books I read from Colleen Hoover, and that's It Ends With Us and Verity. I'm reading 4 of her books, and these two, there's both 7 and 8. It doesn't really matter which place they are, but if I had to do it, I'd put It Ends With Us at 8 and then Verity at 7. Truthfully, I think Verity, if it wasn't the weird romance spot of the main character falling for the husband, I think Verity would have been a really good book. I think if it was just focused as a thriller and no romance, I mean, there could be some romance in it, but if romance wasn't one of the main ploys of it, I actually think Verity would be really good as just a thriller. Because Colleen Hoover wrote it with a really good thriller aspect. Like, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is a page turner. But then it would get to the romantic stuff with the husband and then the main character. I'm like, I don't know. I just didn't feel like, oh, this is good. And with It Ends With Us, I think there was just elements where the abuse part was so well written, the way that she would write it, where you're like, oh, is it though? Is it really? I like the way that she would write it as like, oh, should I actually question this? Those elements were really, really good in this book. But there was just more times when I would read it and I wasn't really vibing with it. And the way that she would write both the male characters, they both were kind of toxic to the point where Lily could easily just not be with either of them. And I think I would be more satisfied with that than actually just being with Atlas. Maybe that's just me. Who knows? I go more in depth. I'm doing like a whole Colleen Hoover video for the future, so be prepared for that. Yeah, so It Ends With Us at number 8 and Verity at number 7. So number 6 is Lease on Love. So every year my little sister recommends me a couple of romance novels. I buy them and I read them and I give them my thoughts. This is the second year in a row, so I do actually have quite a bit of romance novels I've been reading. And next year she'll be doing the same thing. Every year around December I ask her, and then she'll send me usually about 5, and then I'll try reading the 5 throughout the year. Usually it's always in February, but this time I think next year I might just not do that. I might just read them throughout the year. So Lease on Love is number 6. I think it was fine. Truthfully, of all of these, like the rest I have here are all more memorable. This one's just not as memorable. Just a girl trying to start over, and she just falls in love with her roommate. Honestly, the relationship didn't feel like it should happen. It felt more forced. Like, they could have just had a friendship, and I think it would have been fine. Now, the way that this book is written, Jack in this book is like a really rich dude, and he is learning how to recover from his parents' death, and Sadie lives there for basically free, and she's like trying to become a florist, which is so funny because it's like I feel like every time I'm reading a romance novel, the main character is usually like trying to be a florist. So I noticed that as a trope in romance. Maybe it's not a trope, maybe it's just the books I've read, but it feels like that's kind of how it is. But with Lisa in Love, the relationship part, because this is a romance novel, I didn't feel like, ooh, yeah, these guys are meant to be. It felt like, oh, it was just the perfect timing, I guess, in a way. Like, it just didn't feel like, ooh, yeah, these guys are definitely meant to be. It just felt like, oh, well, they live together, so I guess they should just hook up and build a relationship. That's just how it felt like when I was reading this book. So number 5 is Love Wager by Lynn Painter. I actually think this one was pretty fun. I did enjoy it quite a bit. I think the aspect of them like fake dating and then they actually go to like a wedding together as like dates and they end up realizing how much they actually like love each other. I really enjoyed that aspect. I think it was just a fun read that I didn't take too serious, and it felt very organic. I think the way that Lynn Painter wrote this, it felt very organic with the two characters. How they start off, they just like hook up, which is kind of like a trope in romance too. I've noticed is like sometimes they just hook up and then they don't see each other and then they see each other again and then they're like, oh wow, we actually are meant for each other. So I think those aspects are fun to read, and that was my first time reading one of these kind of books like that. I like this book a lot. I think when I go through this again in probably like 2 years, when I have read more romance novels, it might not be a top 5, but right now I think it's a top 5. So this is number 4, and this is my first romance novel I ever read that my little sister recommended me, and that's Beach Read. So this book was interesting. I think the ploy of having the characters who actually hate each other, it's enemies to lovers trope, but I think the ploy of them writing in the other one's genre of books is a really cool idea, and I think Emily Henry does a really good job with it. And it's just, I think the way that she wrote January was actually pretty fun, and just how January is just trying to like build back and just become better, because like I've noticed the tropes in a lot of these books are usually the main characters are struggling with something right off the rip, and then they find the guy and the guy like helps them rebuild or just is just encouraging them, and I think it's a fun way to read that. But this one is just different for me because like she spends the whole summer with this guy who she hates. She is writing in his genre, which I think is sci-fi. It's been a while. It's been 2 years since I read this book. And then the guy is reading in her genre, which is romance. I think it's just such a cool way how they actually can learn more about each other by writing in their genres. I think it's just a fun way to do things. Number 3 on this list is Mr. Wrong Number. I think Mr. Wrong Number is just a fun book. That's the best way to put it. It's a fun read, and just the way that the characters, I think the way that she writes with Olivia in this is like Olivia's kind of just like that, you know, like the bad child, the bad grape, I think that's the word, the bad fruit, that's the word, in the family, where she's just like, oh, she does everything usually bad happens to her. And I like that aspect with this, where she thinks like, just who is this mysterious man, where she just feels comforted by Mr. Wrong Number. You find out who is Mr. Wrong Number, and it's a really cool way of how it's written, and it's honestly just a fun book. I really enjoyed it. I read this book in like a day because I had so much fun reading. So number 2, I actually have 3 books, and one's honorable for one, but because I couldn't actually choose between them, but this is number 2, and that's the Bromance Book Club. This book is so interesting because you just learn, it's just a marriage, and you learn how a man, like he and his wife are getting divorced by reasons. You go through the mind of the man's point of view in this, which is actually pretty interesting, especially because I wasn't expecting that for a romance novel. But he is with his friends that they all play baseball together, and they're all trying to help him cope with like learning how to please his wife essentially. And I really like that aspect. They give him a book and like, read this, and you will learn everything. And I just think it's so funny because, I mean, there's a lot of things where people are like, oh, just read romance and you'll learn how to talk to girls. And in a way, it's not like wrong, because you're reading the genre, what women like and what they think about all the time. And I think personally, I think a lot of men should read romance. It just gives you a different eye, a different view of what women would actually like, instead of reading your spooky books or your fantasy or just aspects that are more through that lens of men. that if you read romance, you can actually learn the lens of what women really do like. I think it's just a really cool ploy, and I do enjoy that aspect. Honorable mention, this could be number one pretty easily. Honestly, number one and this one could be flip-flopped. It doesn't really matter. They're both great. I read them both in like a day because they were just so much fun. And that is Practice Makes Perfect. This book is hilarious. And I think the best scene is the baseball scene. If you read it, you know. And I think it was just a fun thing to do. And I like how it was through POVs of the main character, of the girl, and of the boy. I think it was just a really cool thing. You got a really attractive bodyguard guy that's just super popular because he protects the really iconic pop star. Then they go to this hometown for like a month for her wedding, and he hangs out with the pop star's like brother's sister. And it's a really cool way to read this book, the way that they actually both really like each other right off the rip, and they don't know how to do it, but they go on fake dates and everything. It's just a fun book, honestly. I didn't expect to like this book as much, and there were scenes where I legit just giggled because they were so funny. Especially, I'm telling you guys, the baseball scene. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But if you have not seen the baseball scene, I mean, you have not read the baseball scene, you need to read this book just for the baseball scene, which is like 200 pages into it. Number one, like I said, this could be flipped with Practice Makes Perfect. Doesn't matter. But that is, it happened one summer. This book reminded me of Schitt's Creek so much. If you guys like Schitt's Creek, I think you would really like this book. This book is honestly so much fun to read. I think the main character reminds me so much of Alexa from Schitt's Creek, and that's what it I feel like is inspired from. The main character is a big partier, and she gets sent to the hometown of where her dad was a sailor. They had to remodel this bar in order to make it so it's successful. And she goes back there and she meets a man. Every typical romance novel, he does not like her at all. Like, the way that they write these characters is so good, and I really enjoy it. I think the way that the author writes what goes through a man's mind of how much he cares about a girl, of just his mental issues with so many things, for like trying to show his vulnerability and become emotional towards a girl in this book, is so well done that I felt so relatable to it, because I was like, wow, this author gets it, especially for a man's point of view. Because a lot of men like myself, it's just like ingrained in your mind of being a man where you struggle with showing yourself being emotional or being vulnerable to someone, because you're always taught not to do that. So in this book, it's so good, and I really did enjoy it, and it really left me deep in the core reading this. I was like, wow, I did not expect that. That's probably why this book's number one. Practice Makes Perfect is just a cute little fun book that I enjoyed. This had a lot deeper meaning behind it all, and it sucks because I can't think of the names right now off the top of my head. Oh well. But yeah, this book was just so much fun, and I read it earlier in February, and I just thought it was such a blast to read. So those are my 11 books, not 10. Those are my 11 books I've read currently of all romance novels currently. And that's my ranking currently. I think it's going to change in probably 5 years or so. 50 Shades probably won't be on it. Twilight definitely won't be on it. Neither of them will be on it. But currently, that is my top 10 favorite romance novels currently ranked. I would like to see what happens in the future. Probably in the next year or two, it's probably going to change to be something drastically different. And who knows how the list is going to be. I think I'm going to try and do rankings of all my favorite genres of books every 2 years. That'd be really fun. And just to update, just see where they are at now. It'd be just fun to see. If you guys made it to the end of the video, I do appreciate it. Make sure you guys check out all my socials down below. Comment and let me know below what is your guys' favorite romance novels. Also, what are some romance novels that maybe I should check out in the future? I would love to check it out. I already have about 6 of them that I would love to try, and it'd just be really fun to see what you guys say I should also try out as well. And of course, make sure you guys stay safe, stay humble, and tell someone you love them. I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay weird.